And welcome to another fun-filled episode of that 4K podcast. Ari Rosenbaum along with Dan Venturi. Dan, how are you?
Doing well, bud. 1 week closer to the end of summer.
Yeah,
we all knew it ended last week, right?
Yeah, I tweeted this. I went to Costco last night, and I took a picture of all the Oktoberfests that they have in stock, and I tweeted a thing to Sam Adams, and I said, summer's now officially over. And they tweeted back, but at least they have Oktoberfest to enjoy. I said, yes, but that's my gauge as to when summer is over, and I'm still enjoying summer ale. So,
the air is starting to cool. I mean, it's the past couple of nights out here. It's been in the 60s.
Yeah, that's the August weather, where it gets cool at night. You still got the humidity and heat in the daytime, but it gets a little cool at night. And I know ragweed season's upon us because I've been suffering a couple of days here and there. So we know we're at the end of summer. And, of course, knowing that we're at the end of summer, that means that 4K conference in Cleveland shouldn't be that far off. Progressive Field, September 20th. And then New England, Gillette Stadium, Foxborough on October 11th. November the 8th, New Jersey, East Rutherford, MetLife Stadium. And December 13th, we're going to have it at AT&T Stadium. And, of course, March 2020, we will be at Walt Disney World Swan. And Ray, looking for 2020 events, talking to already Busch Stadium for May. There's a game, Friday night game against the Mets, so we might be doing that, and some other stadiums as well. We'll be looking into 2020 as we further get into 2019. So yeah, a lot of fun going on, and talking about fun, setting up a 401k plan, and the mistakes that employer really needs to avoid when starting a 401k plan. I find that most plans are, kind of screwed up in the sense, smaller, medium-sized plans, and they tend to get screwed up at the very, very get-go. So this week's episode, we're going to talk about the steps that the employers should avoid, the mistakes they make in starting up a 401k plan. The smaller, medium-sized plan business, I've always felt has never served well. So here's some tips for a plan sponsor to avoid when starting a 401k plan. And number one on my hit list, the reason I talk about it, I wrote an article based on it, and I always talk about how it's really important to get off on the right foot. And when I talk about getting off on the right foot, I always point out to my experience during freshman orientation at Stony Brook and how I wanted to join the Jewish student organization Hillel. And Hillel had a barbecue. And I want to say that I was 10 minutes late to the start of the barbecue, and they were already out of food. So the Asian American, the African American students that were eating, they got to eat hamburgers and hot dogs. I was able to get a stale bagel. Now, African American kids and Asian American students have every right to be at a barbecue, but the fact of the matter is they weren't going to join Hillel. It's just a fact. In this woke culture, you gotta say that. So, right off the foot, I really had a bad thing with Hillel, and for the 4 years I was at Stony Brook, I never was really involved, and I could always point to that fact. That I got the bagel instead of the hot dog or the hamburger. But number one on the hit list for plan sponsors, why they're setting up a 401k plan, kind of a mistake they have to avoid making is they need to really understand why they're setting up the plan in the first place, and most plan sponsors don't really understand why they do it. They started up for a variety of reasons, and while there are many reasons, they really need to understand that they set it up so that their employees could save for retirement, that they themselves, as owner employees, can save for retirement. So I think that that's extremely important, and at the very least, it's a benefit. It's an employee benefit like everything else, and it's important that plan sponsors, realize why they set up in the first place.
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't think it'll ever sort of eclipse the health plan in the employee benefit hierarchy, but it is, if it's not 1A, it's definitely 2, right? Like it's critical. Most employees, I would say, everyone that you're looking to recruit to join your team is going to want to see that you've got a plan in place, and preferably there's a healthy match, and it's a well-run kind of benefit. So if those things aren't key to your decision-making process in terms of why you're going to start a 401k plan for your organization, then you probably shouldn't. At the very least, you should think it through some more, I would think.
Oh, exactly. And coupled with that, another important thing is, an employer really has to understand the demographics of their employees. Obviously, when you're a law firm, your demographics for a 401k plan are a lot different than a fast food restaurant. And of course, why does it really matter? Well, it matters because we have discrimination testing on 401k plans, and employees that work not much more than minimum wage are going to save less than law firm associates at a law firm. So obviously that will impact whether lower paid people can save for retirement. That's obviously going to have an impact on all aspects of the plan, especially on the compliance end. Will highly compensated employees be limited to what they can save? Does the employer need a safe harbor plan? Will there be refunds, required or whatnot? Whatever it is, plan sponsors really have to understand, the demographics. Even setting up a eligibility period. If they are an employer that has a lot of turnover, well, maybe having immediate eligibility isn't a good idea. That's how I kind of see it.
Yeah. No, entirely. And similarly, if, as you mentioned, that turnover is an issue, you're going to have to weigh the benefits of, to your point, a safe harbor design, right? If your HCEs can't contribute, but you have excessive turnover, well, that's going to be a pretty tough decision to make, right? I mean, do we write the plan so that your HCEs, the key decision makers of the company, get to take a full benefit from the offering, or at the cost of folks that are transient, that are with your group for a cup of coffee, do they get the match, right, and the additional compensation that kind of cost that goes into all that. So it's in that situation that I just laid out, that's a pretty tough call, right? I mean, and it's entirely subjective to the folks that are calling the shots. What they determine is of greater value to their group. And advisors, TPAs. I think we have to present facts and let the plan sponsor make the decision. I mean, I think there's certain places where I do think there's a benefit to sort of steering or, getting your opinion and sort of influencing the outcome of a plan provision. But in the situation I just laid out, that to me, Ari, and I don't know if you disagree, but that would be more of a hands-off kind of deal, right? Let the plan sponsor sort of take the lead on that.
Sure, absolutely. That's just really something that they need to know. Next on the list, really, plan sponsors. I don't think most on the small and medium size range don't understand that a employer plan sponsor wears two hats, as a plan sponsor and as a plan fiduciary. And the whole idea of a fiduciary liability, even when you're hiring a TPA, they goof off, they make mistakes, it's your problem. Too many plan sponsors don't really know that. And, I think more and more are understanding it. I think that over the past 10 years, the marketing by plan providers has really improved, and obviously litigation uptick in that space has obviously gotten the conversation going. But there are there's so many plan sponsors out there that don't realize, again, they're a plan fiduciary in addition to being a plan sponsor. They have to be more careful with their participants' money than they are with their own money. So, that's just another major thing that I think that plan sponsors aren't really aware of.
Yeah, and yeah, I think there's even less understanding or less familiarity with the obligations and responsibilities associated with being a fiduciary and who those folks are, right? In the not-for-profit world, switching gears as relates to, say, 403Bs. I mean, you've got situations where you've got board members that, their job is to basically raise money that, because of the position they hold, are deemed fiduciaries. And God knows 403B plans are not, the most well-run benefits out there. So there are just a lot of folks that I think have a lot of exposure, a lot of inherent liability just by what they do, that are entirely unaware of it.
Exactly. And of course, another thing that they're unaware of, what their plan providers do. How many plan sponsors don't really know what a TPA does? So they'll change out a good TPA to save a couple bucks on a TPA that's not very good. They really don't understand the delineation of duties between the plan providers, and especially how they work together, which it's a pain, especially if plan sponsors don't really know what the plan providers do, then they really don't have any idea on how to actually review the work of those plan providers.
Absolutely.
How many people don't know a TPA is just a TPA, unless they're serving a 316 fashion. The plan sponsor is still on the hook.
Yeah. No, and I think it's twofold. I think the advisor community, right, as still the primary distribution network between some of the service providers and the plan sponsor, needs to do a better job of conveying that, right? The discussion can't just be cost. There has to be more depth and breadth to that discussion.
Yeah.
Clearly. But I also think there's an opportunity to help. Right? I don't think that there are enough folks that are interested in talking about the dynamics and responsibilities of a plan. And that's definitely a void that I think someone needs to step up and fill.
No, absolutely. It's it's one of those areas that plan sponsors really don't understand. And, they need to understand that a 401k plan is like a really intricate piece of machinery. There's so many different moving parts, and that these plan providers serve different functions in the management of the plan. And part in that, with not understanding what their providers do, not understanding what role they serve in a fiduciary capacity, not understanding that, the broker that they have right now isn't a fiduciary. They don't understand the difference maybe between a 321 and a 338. They may not understand what the 316 administrator does, or why they even should hire one. So not only do they not understand what the providers do, they also don't understand exactly what kind of capacity these providers serve. And obviously, from a liability standpoint, it's also good to know who's going to stand with you at the defense table if you ever got sued.
Yeah, well, that's a big one.
And there are too many providers that advertise that they're serving a fiduciary capacity. Then you'll look at the contract and it says, by golly, they're not.
Which cracks me up.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of people advertising themselves as a limited scope 338 fiduciary. What the heck is that? And of course, 316 administrators, it runs the gamut of what they do.
Oh yeah, no, it's a frontier. It's a frontier, and I almost wish that someone would force the industry to define things, right? Like, believe it or not, you can't. And this always cracks me up. Like, you go to the supermarket, and like they're selling almond milk. It's not milk. milk comes from a cow, right? Like that's, or an animal essentially. That's the definition, the legal definition of milk. And I want to say there was a lawsuit involving that. People were trying, like the milk industry was trying to get all those other folks away from using the term.
Well, there's also like terms with juice or cheese products. You know, you can't. I think that if you add a certain amount of water, like for example, the Trop 50, which is that low calorie, you know, it's just really orange juice watered down. It's a juice beverage because it doesn't have enough juice in it. And the same thing, I think, with some of the processed cheeses, American cheese. It's a cheese product because there's a lot more stuff than just cheese in there.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the reason I brought it up was because there's the uniformity there, right? Everyone knows what to expect when you say juice or milk. That level of clarity and transparency and uniformity, I think, needs to be, integrated into the 316 world, right? We all need to be operating on the same side. The customer, meaning the plan sponsor, needs to understand what they're getting and what the value is. And I think the second that's done, the second we start moving towards that, level of uniformity and definition is when the industry as a whole is going to take a giant leap forward. Not just compliance, but in effectiveness and value to the plan sponsors.
Exactly.
And plan participants.
No, exactly. Another problem with plan sponsors is working with bundled providers. And if you like Fidelity, you can have Fidelity funds in any, plan you want. But I think that too many plan sponsors just feel like, okay, well, I like Fidelity, let me go to Fidelity. I like Vanguard, let me go to Vanguard. Well, not really exploring the opportunities of being in an unbundled space. Bundled providers just going for the sake of going isn't really the best choice. There are a lot of times where going to a bundled provider is the right choice based on cost, based on the advice of a financial advisor or risk attorney who knows whether, a bundled or unbundled choice is the way to go. And just, right off the bat saying, I'm going to take this plan Fidelity, not realizing, the costs involved and, of course, the ramifications of using proprietary funds of a provider because, obviously, thanks to litigation, that's a really big deal now. Proprietary funds, even with the other bundled providers, the shelf space payments, there are a lot of drawbacks along with a lot of positive aspects of the bundled provider approach. So I just think that, plan sponsors are making a mistake where they just right off the bat says, I'm going to take this plan to Fidelity or Vanguard or, Emeritus or, T. Rowe Price, whatever it may be.
Whoever. Well, yeah, and I think the first thing that people don't understand is, despite the name, right, on the outside, the name there are a lot fewer names on the inside, right? There are a lot fewer groups. I mean, Fidelity has their own record-keeping system. Principal has their own record-keeping system. But a lot of the other providers, use FastCore or Relias or whatever it is. I mean, so, you're moving to Vanguard, but Vanguard's not really what you're buying, right? Like, the sausage is being made by somebody else most of the time. So, I mean, the folks in the industry know that. I don't necessarily know if that's something that it should be shared with the plan sponsor community. But to your point, if someone's making a mistake, I think it's our job as the subject matter experts to intercede, right? To prevent that mistake from being made.
Exactly. And last but not least, when we talk about it from time to time, plan sponsors not really understanding the mechanics of a participant-directed plan. Back when I started in 1998, working with a law firm that was associated with the TPA, Mobius Tech, daily value 401k plans wasn't really a big thing. It was starting to become a big thing thanks to a booming stock market and thanks to finally technology coming up. But in those days, if you did daily valuation, participants had to direct investments over the phone, and there'd be like a 2-day change. now, thanks to technology, we get websites and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that was being sold about participant direction of investments was the limited liability that plan sponsors would face. But the problem is they never really bothered to tell the plan sponsor, you know what, to get this liability protection, you have to do A, B, and C. They never really specified. You know what, you got to sit down with your advisor, go through an IPS, have education meetings, that sort of thing. It just never bothered to have discussion of what needs to take place in order to limit liability.
Well, I mean, right? Our favorite was one of our favorite topics, 404C, right? There's a lot of that. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, at some point, it's a law, right? It needs to be enforced. At some point, you get the right people involved, and that's going to become an issue, right? Just because it wasn't yesterday doesn't mean we can rely on sort of that, relaxed sort of position.
And it's a bigger concern when the stock market is down, which right now it's been going down. And if we have a major correction or a crash, this is a topic that's going to be coming back to the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. I mean, we have been, artificially, I think, manipulating the markets for the last few years. We get one of these every, 10, 15 years or so.
Well, in the 2000s, it felt a lot more often. It was 2001, 2001, and then 2008 through 10.
Yeah, well, they got creative, right? One was a tech crash, and one was, artificial real estate. So they definitely got creative. I don't know. I have no idea. As a complete side note, though, as we're talking about crazy things, did you see that our president was trying to buy Greenland?
Yeah, Trump's folly, I guess. I don't know. I heard about it. It's,
when was the last time that's even come up as a thought? I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know we could buy, chunks of land anymore. Well, it's an interesting thought.
Seward's folly was Alaska.
Which worked out well.
Yeah, obviously we bought some territory from, what was it, Gadsden Purchase? We bought some territory from Mexico, and then of course Louisiana Purchase. That was pretty big back in the day.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was a thing. I don't know the 50,000 people that live in Greenland. I don't know how they would take that.
Yeah, there was 56,000, and it cost like 600 something million to subsidize their existence or something.
Yeah.
Is what I had read. So I don't know. It just popped into my head. It just not remotely anything I would have expected.
Well, that's what you get for the Trump White House. But that's my political talk for the day. Speaking of stuff, this is actually our 50th episode.
Oh, is it? Hey.
Yeah, and so episode 53 will be our 1 year anniversary.
That is awesome. We've made it to a year. That is great and frightening at the same time. Yeah,
I met an advisor today, a really new advisor. He's based out of Northport, and he's like, "Oh, I listen to the podcast." I'm like, "Wow, you're one of the 40 or whatever."
Well, and now he got some play on the podcast.
Exactly. So that's it for this week. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Of course, come to that. Go to that 401ksite.com for information about all our events, to sign up, and information even about sponsoring it and all that stuff. And of course, just saying so long, farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.
Have a great weekend, all. Take care.